A 62-foot steel trawler changed hands on a dock in British Columbia for $340,000. The buyer paid a marine surveyor $400 to inspect it. That surveyor was recommended by the broker. The broker was paid by the seller. None of this was disclosed in writing. The survey identified 14 items of concern. It did not mention the osmotic blistering below the waterline, the failing raw water impeller, or the corroded zincs, because those are found by haul-out, and haul-out was not included in the fee. 11 months later, the new owner spent $68,000 at a boatyard fixing what the survey did not find. That $68,000 was not the large part of the story. The large part had been accumulating since the day the lines were cast off and the dream began. In moorage fees, in diesel, in insurance premiums, in the slow arithmetic of a steel hull in saltwater, and it was sitting in a ledger the buyer never opened. This is not one problem. It is a layered structure with at least 7 distinct mechanisms, and each mechanism is engineered to extract value from someone who has not run the numbers. Some of those mechanisms are hidden. Most of them are in plain sight, disclosed in documents that are signed without being read, priced in line items that feel small beside the purchase price, or buried in the seasonal rhythm of a life that looks, from the outside, like freedom. The question that governs everything that follows is this: of all the money that flows through the Liveaboard life on a Canadian waterway, how much of it stays with the person who thought they were buying independence, and how much of it moves, silently, reliably, month after month, to the people who built the system around them? That question cannot be answered yet, but it can be answered. Before the ledger opens, there is the dream to consider, because the dream is the mechanism's first and most important component. Stand on the dock at dawn in a harbor where the tide is still running out. The air smells of salt and diesel and fresh coffee from the galley below. The hull is dark against the grey water, broad and purposeful, a working shape, not the sleek vanity of a sailing yacht, but something that feels earned, functional, the silhouette of a vessel that has crossed water for a reason. Inside, the wood is teak and cherry, warm in the morning light coming through the port lights. The galley is compact and complete. A gimbaled stove, a chart table with the paper charts still folded the way the previous owner left them. A VHF radio on channel 16. The vocabulary of this world is different from any other. You do not have a kitchen, you have a galley. You do not go upstairs, you go on deck. Every word signals membership in a community that takes seamanship seriously, that values self-sufficiency, that has chosen, deliberately, to live close to the water and far from the suburb. The trawler offers not just a home, but a thesis about how a life should be arranged, smaller, slower, more deliberate, more real. The people selling this life, the brokers, the marina operators, the outfitters, understand this completely. They are not selling a vessel. They are selling an identity. The price, they say, can be discussed when you're ready. For now, let the lines and the light do the work. The arithmetic, as always, is for later. The arithmetic is now. Moorage in a Canadian marina with adequate services, power, water, pump-out access, reasonable proximity to provisioning, runs in the major coastal markets, somewhere between $1,200 and $2,500 per month, for a vessel in the 40 to 65-foot range. Call it $1,800 as a working midpoint. That is $21,600 annually, before a single maintenance dollar is spent. Applied to a $300,000 purchase, the low end of a seaworthy steel or fiberglass trawler in Canadian waters, that moorage figure represents roughly 7% of the asset's value, extracted annually, producing nothing. Every year. The second benchmark, insurance for a liveaboard vessel of this type and size, in Canadian waters, with full navigational range and appropriate liability coverage, runs between 2 and 4% of insured value annually. On a vessel insured at $300,000, that is $6,000 to $12,000 per year, $9,000 in the middle. The third benchmark, maintenance marine surveyors, boatyards and experienced liveaboards broadly agree that a vessel in active use should be budgeted at 10 to 15% of its value annually for maintenance, repairs, and refit. Haul-out, bottom paint, engine hours, electrical systems, standing rigging if applicable, safety equipment recertification, and the category that defeats every forecast, the unplanned failure. On a $300,000 boat, that is $30,000 to $45,000, call it $35,000 at the conservative end, moorage $21,000, insurance $9,000, maintenance $35,000. The true annual cost of owning and living aboard, before diesel, before groceries, before the mooring lines wear out, before the water-maker membrane fails, is $65,000 or more, on an asset that is simultaneously depreciating. What is advertised as a lower cost of living is in many cases a higher one. The only variable is how long it takes to understand the difference. This analysis is published regularly and without sales language for anyone who finds arithmetic more reliable than a brochure. The argument continues. The first escape route a reasonable person identifies is depreciation avoidance, the conviction that a trawler, unlike a car or a motorhome, holds its value. Steel hulls last, the logic goes. Fiberglass doesn't rot. A well-maintained vessel appreciates. This is true of a narrow class of vessels, maintained to a standard that the annual cost benchmarks described above would support, and only if market conditions cooperate. In practice, the Canadian used vessel market is thin, seasonal, and geographically constrained. A vessel that appraises at $300,000 in July may sit unsold at $270,000 in October, not because it has deteriorated, but because the buyer pool has contracted with the season. More structurally, the broker who sells the vessel on exit is operating under the same incentive structure as the broker who facilitated the purchase, paid by the seller, motivated by transaction volume, not by the seller's net recovery. Commission on a vessel sale in Canada typically runs between 8 and 12% of the sale price. On a $300,000 transaction, that is $24,000 to $36,000, leaving the seller's proceeds before the check is written. The vessel did not have to depreciate for the owner to lose money. The transaction costs alone consumed what many owners described as their equity cushion. The numbers close the exit before the owner reaches it. The second escape route is the charter offset, the strategy of placing the vessel into a charter program or renting it on peer-to-peer platforms during periods when the owner is ashore. The pitch is coherent. The boat earns income offsets moorage and insurance, the asset pays for itself. The conditions under which this fails are structural. Charter programs administered by marinas or management companies typically retain between 30 and 50% of gross charter revenue in management fees. The vessel must meet commercial standards, Transport Canada certification, specific safety equipment, commercial insurance, which adds cost. Charter use accelerates wear, engine hours accumulate, upholstery degrades, plumbing is stressed by strangers unfamiliar with marine systems. The maintenance budget, already at 10 to 15% of vessel value for personal use, must be revised upward for commercial use. Many owners who enter charter programs discover within 2 seasons that the gross revenue is insufficient to cover the management fees, the incremental maintenance, the additional insurance premium, and the regulatory compliance costs, and that the vessel has now accrued wear that reduces its resale value. The income disappeared into the system that was supposed to generate it. The third escape route is the Liveaboard as downsizing strategy. Sell the house, eliminate the mortgage, move aboard, achieve financial freedom. On paper, the substitution appears clean. Moorage at $1,800 per month against a mortgage at $3,000. The difference looks like $1,200 of monthly savings, compounded across years. The mechanism that closes this off is the asset asymmetry. Real estate in the Canadian markets where marinas are affordable enough to make liveaboard life practical has, over the relevant timeframes, appreciated in ways that marine assets have not. The person who sold a paid-off property in a mid-sized coastal city in order to go aboard did not merely trade a house for a boat. They traded an appreciating asset for a depreciating one, with annual carrying costs that compound against the difference. The monthly savings exist in cash flow. The annual loss exists in net worth. These are not the same statement, and the strategy's advocates frequently present only the first. No mechanism has a trapdoor at the bottom. They all have accounting identities. The only variable is which column of the ledger the owner is reading. Now the three profiles converge. The first entered through debt, a marine mortgage at rates between 1 and 3 percentage points above conventional residential rates, secured against an asset that lenders treat as higher risk for terms typically shorter than real estate financing. Monthly payments that appeared manageable against a slip in a mid-priced marina became unmanageable when the engine required replacement at $40,000 and the lender declined to refinance against the reduced vessel value. The second entered through the clever strategy, the charter offset, the peer-to-peer rental, the scheme that turned the asset into income, 2 years of accelerated wear, a commercial insurance audit, and a management company fee structure that extracted half of gross revenue before expenses produced a vessel worth less than the purchase price and a balance sheet that looked worse than the one they left. The third paid cash. No debt, no leverage, no monthly payment. Believed immunity was purchased with the wire transfer, spent 7 years absorbing moorage, maintenance, insurance, and haul-out cycles against an asset that declined in value at a rate somewhere between 3 and 8% annually, in real terms, and then spent $30,000 in broker commissions and repair concessions to exit the position. All three arrived at the same destination. The specifics differed. The outcome did not. Who actually got paid? The marina collected moorage, every month, regardless of weather, engine condition, or owner satisfaction. The insurer collected premiums. The boatyard collected haul-out fees. The broker collected commission on entry, and when the time came, on exit. The surveyor collected the inspection fee. The management company collected its percentage of the charter gross. These entities absorbed no depreciation. They carried no hull risk. They had no exposure to the Canadian winter, or the Pacific gale, or the corroded shaft seal that announced itself at 11 o'clock on a Saturday night in Desolation Sound. All of that risk sat with the owner. It was structured to sit with the owner by contracts written in plain language that nobody read carefully, by incentive structures that steered every professional in the transaction toward the transaction itself rather than toward the buyer's long-term interest, by a cultural narrative powerful enough to make a $65,000 annual cost feel like a choice about freedom rather than a decision about money. A trawler in Canadian waters is not freedom purchased with a wire transfer. It is a liability position wrapped in the most effective marketing available to the marine industry, the image of a life lived deliberately on the water, apart from the systems that govern everyone else. That image is real in the ways that matter emotionally. It is not a description of the financial structure underneath it. Clarity about the structure is the only advantage available to anyone considering the decision. The map was drawn by the people who profit from the journey, and now you know where it leads.